Oh, boy.
Are we ready?
It is a review.
I don't know. It's really up to Melanie.
No, we have 2 minutes.
We have 2 minutes, Your
But
Worship.
we are live.
But we are live. See that? Everyone behaves. I don't.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, good evening and welcome to the budget meeting for March 8th, 2023. I'll open the meeting by taking any declarations of pecuniary interest. Hearing none. Move on to adopt the agenda, please. I'll take a mover and a seconder, Madam Clerk.
they're already moved and seconded. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is moved by Councillor Pellerin and seconded by Councillor Teichman. Be it resolved that the agenda for the budget meeting held on March the 15th, 2023 be adopted as presented.
All those in favor? You're going to have to tell me whether it's carried because I can't see
Yes.
everything. Thank you. Okay, just a brief introduction. We're going to move on from where we left off. So this evening, we're going to start with the budget presentation by the chief for our fire and emergency services. And when that portion is complete, we'll move on with the budget for mayor and council and for our corporate services department. So with that, I will pass it to Mr. Barbeau if he wants to make any opening remarks or invite the chief to continue. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. No opening remarks because last week's my remarks were all inaccurate. I didn't get even names right. So what I'll do is pass it on to the Chair of Emergency Services to start with a presentation from the chief. And we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Barbeau. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome, everyone. So I will pass the floor to our Chief, Frank Lufin, for the introduction of his budget. The floor is yours, Mr. Lufin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to Madam Mayor and Council. I present to you tonight our fire service budget, operating budget, as well as our capital budget. As we go through on the breakdown, you have starting off with the miscellaneous income. That falls into our donations, fire department revenues, revenues that we receive from other organizations, whether it be donations, grants, those types of items, as well as income from MTO callouts. The fire department isn't a revenue generating organization, but we do try and recover some of our costs, and one of that is through the MTO callouts. We move down into our expenditures. As with every other department, we have our HR costs, our salaries and wages. The benefits, the education portion. So under the education portion, one thing that has been done for when I started in 2022 and moving into 2023, we've moved training for our members from once a month up to twice a month. So there's going to be a little bit of an increase in there, what we're paying our volunteers for attending the training sessions. As we move down to our operating costs, this gets into our materials and supplies, basically our functions in order to run the fire department. Equipment maintenance, purchase of gear, protective equipment, those items. Our license and permit fees, that covers our DZ license renewals for our members, their medicals and their license, as well as our licensing for our communication systems, our radio towers, any ministry licenses that we require. Office supplies is straightforward. Our general insurance, that's straightforward. Our repair and maintenance, one thing that we are noticing as our fleet ages, those costs start to increase somewhat. Getting parts for older vehicles becomes more and more difficult, and we will see as we go forward those costs increasing as the years progress. Our service and rentals, that covers our agreements with M&R, for example, some of those agreements, as well as private contractors that are plowing some of our fire halls, different repairs to the stations. Utilities and telecommunications, that's covering into our pagers, our repeaters. I cover those sections in there. So I'm going to pass the floor over through, if it's okay with Mr. Chair, to Ms. Craddock for when we get into our expenditures and net surplus operations part.
I'm going to flip it back to you for a moment and let you go through your capital.
All right,
And then we'll,
then we'll go through that part.
yeah, absolutely.
Very good. So before I leave the operating, for council's information, the operating is pretty well status quo from last year. There's some small increases due to our HR, the cost of equipment. But overall, it's pretty much where it was set up from last year. The previous chief and council, through their budget approval, had set us up well to be able to maintain our fleet and maintain our level of service that we are providing to our municipality. Any questions from council on the operating section? Mr. Chair.
Just the one question about the license and permit. I'm just wondering if it's a typo because it's a 1,600 to 11,000.
No, it's not a typo.
Okay.
Chief, I can just, it's just that previously we actually had not been compensating our volunteers for their DZ licensing. You know, so the chief has suggested that they are firefighters, the same as our regular firefighters, and we should be compensating those that have to go and get their annual physicals done.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. I will move
Oh,
on.
excuse me, sorry, I have a couple questions. I just couldn't figure out where the hand up thing was here.
Madam Mayor,
Thank you. That was one of my questions about the increase in the licensing and permits. And then we haven't talked about capital yet. You're going to go into your capital budget after this, and that's going to be explained. Okay, as far as the facilities, like the different fire halls, is that managed under a separate part of the municipal budget, like through the community services and facilities? Because there's nothing there about maintenance to buildings or anything like that.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, the facilities, I take care of all our outside stations. Our 8 stations are my responsibility for the maintenance. Working through our services, we do have some repairs that are required in them. So roofs leaking, those types of issues. Some of those expenses are falling under our capital expenses. For example, in Verner, we have a roof leak that we're trying to address. We did repair a couple of the roofs last year at the end of the season, but we also have sealing the roof in Verner. We have on the list for roof repairs, Mud and Prime Station 3, as well as reshingling. And those are all incorporated into the building maintenance cost.
If I may, Chief,
Okay,
it's in
sorry,
your repairs
that-
and maintenance.
Yeah. Okay. So that really covers the buildings and such. And then I had one other question under the revenue section. For last year, the budget was 18,000 and the actual was almost 60,000. but you're keeping the budget at 18,000. Is there a variable aspect to those revenues that you don't like to kind of expect, because it could put you in a position, like I'm just trying to understand the difference between what the budget is and what the actual was. Is that an anomaly for that year, or why is the budget so much lower than what the actuals were for last year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, one of the reasons you're seeing that large price difference, we rely heavily on the MTO callouts, accidents on the highway, fire calls out on the highway, and we bill back to MTO, who then go after the insurance companies. That number fluctuates substantially. Last year ended up being a very busy year for highway callouts, hence why the amount was substantially more than what was budgeted. If we turn around and increase our budget to reflect, let's say 50,000 of that 57,000, and we don't have the call volume, then we're now going into a deficit on respect to our revenues. So being conservative, we're going with the 18,000, same as last year. If we have a busy year, we may be up in that amount again, but if we don't have a busy year as far as highway callouts, then at least we may be closer to what we're estimating for a revenue budget.
Okay, thank you very much. That covers my questions. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chief. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Anyone else for any questions? I see none. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving over to the capital budget items. We have on our capital plan replacement of one vehicle. Technically, through previous asset management and planning for future expenses, we should have been replacing two vehicles last year and one in 2023. Due to COVID, due to cost measures, supply chain issues, that did not happen. I'm proposing to council that we look at least replacing one vehicle this year, or at least start the process to replace one vehicle this year. We send out our request for proposals, request for tenders. We will probably receive that, I'm going to say July, August. By the time they start the build, we'd be looking at this fall. And right now, the current turnaround, we're looking at 2 years before we would see a vehicle. Just again, because of suppliers being able to get vehicles and cabs and chassis. So that's where that 550,000 is being proposed to council. The other item that we have on the list is a utility trailer. Purpose for the utility trailer is we borrow an individual's trailer every now and then when we have to shuttle Cascade bottles if we have a call outside the municipality. If we're replenishing our air supply, and what the Cascade system is, it's a breathable air system that we refill bottles so the members can wear when they're entering dangerous zones. These bottles and these masks require a level of service, and as these tanks deplete, we have to go and replace them into the stations. We have them set up in our stations, in all 8 stations for that matter. So to transport these 4 large bottles every time, we either borrow somebody's trailer or have them brought over through in somebody's pickup. The other part that we're looking at using this utility trailer for is when we get into forestry fires. Currently, we have our forestry equipment all sitting, and we load it into the back of the pickup trucks, the back of the fire trucks, respond up to our forest fires. With this utility trailer, we'd be able to take that equipment, at least have it all in one location, our portable pumps, have everything on the back, hook it up to one of our pickup trucks, and respond if we have to get further out into the bush, as we had a couple of years ago with the large M&R working relationship with the large bushfires to the north. I'm also proposing for hydraulic spreaders and cutters. Hydraulics are electric, they're battery operated, they're not on the hydraulic pumps. And the purpose is to be able to place these in our outer stations. Looking at Field, looking at Verner, looking at Laving that are on the major highways, being able to provide them with some equipment. Right now they have handheld sets, which are basically a small jack pump, and you're trying to pop open a door to get to the individuals that may be trapped in those vehicles. With the hydraulics, battery powered, they can go with the combination tool, has the cutter and the spreader all as one unit. And they'll be able to get those doors open until we can either get there with the rescue from Station 1 here, with the heavy hydraulics, the battery or the motor powered hydraulics. This will at least get them going and be able to perhaps save some time for our members when they're dealing with their calls in other areas. I also have a hydraulic multi. So the multi is a cutter and a spreader, two separate units. They have two distinctive roles of what they do during when we're extricating individuals out of the vehicles. We're looking at putting that onto our rescue truck here. Our hydraulic system is getting older. I do have to replace some lines this year. But again, this with mechanical engines, you run the risk of these fouling up, plugs having a hard time starting, 30 below weather, and you're limited to how far you can get to if the vehicle's off the roadway. With battery powered equipment, you now have that capability to be able to go further back. If we're up in let's say an incident up in a bush road somewhere, we can load these onto the pickup truck and bring them in without having to break the big pumps and all the lines. Roof and facility repair. So this goes back to the question that Madam Mayor was asking. So we also have it as a fire service facility under the capital. As I mentioned, the roof and burner, we're estimating, I believe it's in around $40,000 to repair that roof. Because of the price, it falls into a capital, it would fall into a capital project. SCBA cascade system. So again, going back to what the SCBA is, self-contained breathing apparatus. The firefighters wear these when they're in the hot zones. This protects them, gives them clean air to be able to breathe. Our current system is our bottles are set up at the station, the large bottles, and they have a copper line that runs from one bottle to the next. As we fill up the smaller bottles that the firefighters wear, we have to connect these bottles and charge them down. Challenge being twofold. One, the copper lines are difficult when we have to replace one or two of the large bottles. You have to have everything lined up directly so you're not kinking or bending those copper lines. And what they call a frag station. So it's a box that you install these smaller bottles into when you're filling them. So in the event that something was to happen, that one splits, cracks, the valve blows off, the individual that's recharging these bottles is protected. Less chance of injury. Right now we have open cylinders. If the bottle was to decide to explode for some reason or another, then we run that risk of a firefighter being injured. This system comes with, as I said, an enclosed box that would be mounted, proper gauges to be able to monitor how much air we're putting into our smaller cylinders, and flexible lines so that when we're changing one individual bottle, it'll be that much easier to be able to line them up, hook them up, as opposed to the challenge that we're having now. The shed and pump, that is looking for up in field. We have a cistern up by the outdoor rink up there, 10,000 gallon water supply sitting at the outdoor rink. There was never anything connected to that tank to be able to supply us with some water. The proposal is $30,000 to build us a small shed, heated. We have hydro right at the outdoor community center, and then have a pump set up in that house so that wintertime, summertime, the trucks can go up there, replenish with water, and respond back to the calls. And through you, Mr. Chair, that's my presentation for our capital budget items.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions, anyone?
Did Lisa have something to add?
Well, she said,
Was that after?
If I may, so the portion down below that transfer in and out of reserve is again just how he's funding his capital. So if you look on page 45, there are reserves carrying over in dedicated reserves for fleet, which is money that's been put in reserve in prior year. That said, the 495 that you see transferred to reserve is a $50,000 increase over last year. And that's to start to increase the transfer to reserve for the fire services fleet. To Chief Lufin spoke about getting a little bit behind in our fleet acquisition and the length of time it takes to acquire fire vehicles. The other thing is that we've found a very significant increase in pricing on vehicles. We were, in prior years, our capital plan, we knew we were going to run into trouble in a few years. He's going to run into trouble a lot faster on our fleet replacement just due to the increasing costs of fire fleet. So, but with the goal of transfer to reserves, everything is, if we kind of can smooth that over years and reach a stable level of investment into reserves, which is investment into our assets. And so there's a $50,000 increase in what we would like to put into reserve this year to offset, future expenditures that may come with fleet replacement.
Thank you. Any questions? Conseiller Pellerin?
Merci, M. Saint-Louis. Just the hydraulic spreading cutter, you mentioned Leving, Burner, and Field, the 60,000 for the three of them or each?
Sorry, that is for the three of them. Fine. Le prix, c'est environ 20 000 chaque pour les multi.
Deuxième.
Oui.
Le fire apparatus, peut-être tu l'as dit, I guess c'est un truck. C'est-tu les gros, c'est pas les gros trucks avec l'échelle qui sort, là.
No, it's not the aerial. That price that we're estimating is for either the rescue or tanker.
Aerial would be about $1 million.
Yeah. But a tanker would be 550. Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the price of a truck, a standard cabin chassis, 2,000 gallons of water, we used to be able to pick them up about 280,000 to 300,000. With the substantial price increase, we're looking at 500,000 minimum just for a standard cabin chassis with 2,000 gallons of water on it. That's not including adding a pump as the previous trucks. When I went through our fleet, looking at what we currently have, our tankers could be strictly tankers, so we could remove that $40,000 to $60,000 cost expense of adding a pump to those trucks and just use them as straight tankers. The other proposal, and again, this will be council's decision, is shuffling some of these vehicles around. So moving vehicles from where they're a higher call volume to a lower call volume and extending our plan through our replacement plan. Ideally would be to stagger these vehicles to, let's say, every 2 to 3 years, as opposed to where we currently have 3 vehicles that are 1999s and 3 of them that are also 2000s. So there's 6 vehicles that are kind of falling into that.
Just so you know, historically at Amalgamation, there was a grant, I believe it was an MPDM grant, that the 2 chiefs ago, Chief Savage, ordered 3 right off using a grant. So, but the problem is, as he's indicating, is they all have the same kind of expected shelf life. And so that's going to be the challenge in the next few years. As Craddock indicated, with all of our assets, is the goal or the attempt is to try to get all of our capital expenditures at a level where we can sustain our assets. We've done a pretty good job, and we started very early. I could tell you that the fire department, because of the lower prices, there was also, and the chief isn't necessarily averse to looking at how we handled things in the past, of maybe finding you'd have less time or less use of it. But if there's one that was necessary, perhaps it could be used once here and there. So he'll look at that, but you can't really bank on it. So I would suggest that this is probably the budget that has the biggest challenge in terms of vehicle replacement in the next few years. One of the things down the line that could be offset on that is, and this will be coming to council, is a fire master plan so that we can have a better framework as to what belongs where and how much, kind of thing. And I think that could increase our efficiency and our effectiveness. And so that, I believe, will be coming to you next meeting to request the go ahead. And that fire master plan is not included in here because we still have some funds that were released by the provincial government about 3 years ago now with, I think it was called a modernization fund or something like that. And so we still have, that's how we paid for our operational review and a few other things. So that's what we'll be looking at, bringing that to you. But the challenge with fire is in the equipment that they need. There's also challenges operationally that the chief in the last 7 months has done a great job with respect to replenishing, beefing up the what we call volunteers and increasing that complement. So that's good in terms of the people part of it, but now the equipment needs to be had as well. So not much else here. This is emergency services. This is just something that needs to happen. And we have a really interesting kind of topography and demographic with a bunch of bush and a bunch of, so we have some equipment that is very old, but allows our fire department to gain access in more remote areas, bush, lakes, and so on and so forth. So, but yeah, that's the challenge with respect to that. So the increase, which is a decision council can make, of going from adding 50 grand, 445 to 495, in our opinion, it's probably should be around the 650 mark. So we'll have to be slowly chipping away at that. And I can assure council that it isn't our intention to be Cadillac. We understand that we're never going to have the full resources to have what we want. The staff wants to replace certain things, and obviously they're going to be pushed down the line from optimizing or from an optimal solution. We understand that, but there's a limit to that as well. We have to be able to respond when the need arises. So I'd just like to add that to council. So.
Thank you. Madam Mayor?
Sorry, if somebody else wants to go first, my dogs are being stupid.
Anybody else have any questions? No, you're in.
Okay, well, excuse the noise in the background. I might have an older version here. So on page 37 of the main budget document, the capital budget for this year shows it as 870, but the sheet that we were provided today actually totals to 930. Yeah, do I have?
Oh, the dog's going to be in trouble.
Somebody will be.
If we hear it, yay.
Okay, so it actually totals to 930. Do I have a wrong page? And that's why the numbers don't add up.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
So the 930 is correct. And so when we're funding things out of reserve, sometimes between when the operating budget goes out to council and things get tweaked down the road, if it doesn't impact the tax level, then the capital gets tweaked a little bit because it's coming from reserve. So that's what just happened, is that we tweaked the capital after the operating budget went out. It's all still covered from reserve. There's no tax implication to that. It just comes from reserve.
So the 870 should be 930
Yep.
in the document.
Okay, so the 550, is that the total cost of whatever vehicle it is that you're looking, or does that combine with other monies in reserve? Like, I'm just, 550 doesn't seem like a lot for the fire apparatus. That's hard.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The 550 that is estimated for the replacement of the vehicle is one vehicle. And that was hopefully including the taxes, which we do get a portion of the provincial sales tax back. That is today's estimate on a vehicle.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Madam Mayor. Anyone else with questions? I see none. So that will close our portion for the budget. I will return the floor to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Liffen, for your presentation. We do appreciate the importance of our fire and emergency services in the community. And I appreciate the time that you put in to preparing that information for all of council. We're going to move on next to the budget for mayor and council. Generally, I would chair that as chair of general government. But because I'm not in person tonight, I have asked Councillor Nicol to chair this portion of the meeting, just because I think it's easier done with somebody in the room with you all. So with that, I will pass the floor to Councillor Nicol, who will continue. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we will be opening the mayor and council part. So I'll pass the floor to Ms. Craddock.
And actually, if council is agreeable, we go through committees and boards and levies first, just because we don't have a lot of discretion in those. If I can just walk you through those first, then we'll jump back to mayor and council. So on page 39, there's actually just a couple little committees with just little, in your operating, just some little values to them. So we actually have sort of an amount we set aside for emergency measures. In the past, we have and you look on your reserves, you will actually see there's a reserve for emergency measures. We were doing a number of replacements on generators and on having emergency centers and things like that. We maintain just this little bit. It covers communication, sometimes our servicing on our tanks and things like that. Several years ago, there was a heritage committee set up. It maintains just a very small budget for projects that might come its way. It's not just those two little committees. Boards on page 40. So police board is just the police board itself. Policing comes a little bit after that. They've actually reduced their budget a small amount. On transition, it was recommended that the police board maintain a level of legal budget in it. And since we're past transition and the contract sits with the municipality, there's no sort of lingering things with transition. They've reduced sort of the legal in the board, because that's part of it, is the board doesn't run into any kind of legal issues anymore. Library is their approved ask to us that's already gone through their board and approval process. And cemetery is an estimate, based on kind of historical, we've sort of stayed the same. Cemetery board, I understand, hasn't met yet. There's not a lot of change in the cemetery operations. So that's where those numbers come from. I'm going to keep you flipping along. Policing, we give you a bit more detailed on. This is, again, we've come out of several kind of years of policing. We're finally in the new facility. We also in this year moved to the calls for service model. And I think I talked to this council, not just the prior council, but the calls for service. Okay. So that's why you see, if you go down in contractors, that's why you see the significant decrease in the contractors line. And that's the switch from the FTE model that we were on for the first 3 full calendar years to the calls for service model. Now, the budget includes not just our OPP contract, but it also includes our facility and such there. So, we'll get lease revenue on a portion of that facility, the portion that the province occupies. The other revenue is when people go and get criminal record checks and all that kind of stuff that comes through, that comes back to us. Grants is for they have a community and not a community and safety for well-being like our plan, but they have a community and safety grant, court security grant. So that's what the grant revenue is. And then the rest goes just to maintaining our facility and utilities and all the rest for our facility. The part that's in there is that there is also an amount that it sits in the system back here. So in the past, sort of through transition, we borrowed, use my little air quotes on that, from general reserve to smooth the transition. Now that we've got that savings in the police contract, we're going to begin to repay that reserve of the funds that were borrowed. So there's a few years of this sort of repaying into general reserve before we're going to see the full savings come through as far as, you know, sort of budget savings, tax savings kind of go. So that's tied into the repayment. And so then I'm going to flip you one more to service partners. And these are ones that we, again, have really no control over. So DSAB, this is their established budget. They're coming to see us next week, I believe, to talk a little bit about what DSAB does and what goes on at DSAB. Every year, we tend to get hit a little bit harder on DSAB than their actual levy increases because it goes based on weighted assessment. And as our assessment grows, because we've got new housing bills and things like that, then we end up taking a little bit more of the pie on that. The Chateau includes their levy, plus we do this transfer to reserve. And I believe Mr. Barbo talked to us about that a few weeks ago and how some of the, when they get to the point where they're doing the redevelopment there and how that will help us get to a sustainable level so that when the Eau Chateau starts the redevelopment, we've got sort of funds there to help us pay for the redevelopment, our portion of the redevelopment when we get there. Health unit is their established levy already. They've passed their levy and that's our portion. And then animal control is the Humane Society contract that was approved a couple months ago. So that's all the sort of boards and committees and things like that. I'll hand it back to you for a moment, Madam Chair.
Any questions or comments so far? Seeing none?
I just try to wait in case anybody else has questions. I don't know if you said this, can we go back to policing on 41? So the actual from last year on the grants, how does one achieve a negative grant?
So what happened is that I was actually late in 2022. The province, their operations had been a little topsy-turvy through COVID and people not being in offices and things like that. The province actually finally reconciled the court security and prisoner transport grants from 2020 and 2021. And because the courts weren't in session through COVID as well, we had been overpaid on those two grants. And so we repaid that grant for those 2 years.
I think that's a great question. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get the clarification on that. And it's just on the leasing. So when you look at the financing costs and there's an increase of almost $1 million, that is offset by the decrease in operating costs of 1.2 million. Is that correct? So we're just flipping that cost savings from the calls per service model into debt repayment? Is that how that's to be understood?
Mostly, yes. So there was budgeted some debt repayment in 2022. Now we've got a sort of a full year of debt repayment. So yes, the savings is offsetting our facility costs, but also in that is in the finance expense is about $650,000 that we're paying back into general reserve to start repaying those amounts that were taken from general reserve.
Okay. And the financing cost, is that both interest and capital on the debt?
Yes.
Okay. And when will the facility, it's a 30-year mortgage we have on that, or like what's the total repayment plan for that? When do we not owe any more money on that building?
So the financing is actually split in two parts. So because a part of the building is sort of provincial, or percentage of the building is actually leased for the province, and a percentage of the building is actually West Nipissing OPP. And the split is 48 for the provincial and 52 for the West Nipissing. And so I split the financing the same way. So the provincial portion of the financing and is a 15-year repayment. We've got a 20-year lease, a 15-year repayment, so that we're sort of covered with that. And then we've got a 30-year on the municipal portion.
Okay. And sorry, just back on policing again, in the revenue side on the lease, the amount that is shown for the budget for 338 is slightly higher than last year. Is there a built-in increase on the lease rate that is adjusted every year? And the second part of that question is, as the OPP uses the facility to cover a wider area and we get more officers who are not West Nipissing using that building, will that lease rate go up? Is the lease rate determined by body count?
Not by body count, but there's the lease is sort of several components. So there's a portion that applies to property tax that's part of the lease component. There's a portion that's kind of called our base rent, and that portion, so the property tax will change year to year. The base rent, that portion won't change. That portion is it's split on the base assumption of 48% usage from provincial, 52% usage from us. And then there's an operating component. And the operating component is estimated the same, but it will vary from year to year because we reconcile that at the end of the year. And that will change based on what the operating expenses are. It will also change based on if it becomes that the building is actually 57% provincial and only 43% West Nipissing, then that portion will change. The operating reconciliation will change each year, yes.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I had. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, any other questions or comments? Mr. Pellet?
Thank you. I'm confused with all this, but so the percentage of the municipality and the province.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was talk on the news that Noirville's attachment was closing or whatever, and maybe, I don't know if Warren's still there. So if they expand, if they close this, I guess they're moving here.
Well, that was already factored in. It really is, as Ms. Craddock indicated, a kind of a calls for service or an activity based, regardless of what the provincial cost or the municipalities are paying the province to house. Really, that isn't our concern. Our concern is we have 52% of the activity, and the province, which includes provincial highways, Marks-Day, Warren, St. Charles, and Noelville, account for 48% of all other activity. And so that's why our share is 52%. Right? So regardless of whether they shut down in St. Charles or not St. Charles, in Marks-Day, Warren or whatever, that really doesn't change their activity level. It really just changes how they're dealing with their individual contractors themselves. So I don't want to say anything too politically incorrect, but we knew that when we were building this building that we would have a fine facility that would have more officers near where near West Nipissing than we had in the past. And that's why they were able to find savings as well. It's called a blended service. And so they don't need 25 officers providing the service. They're only billing us for what we actually use, where in the other scenario on an FTE model, you'd have to have a lot of officers to cover time off and all of that. That's not covered. Like that's kind of absorbed by the province, and it's just billed for what you use kind of thing. So it's a good deal. So we don't change that. If the activity, let's say if they went and grabbed, which wouldn't, if the OPP went and grabbed, say, Brit as an example, and, which is part of Parry Sound, then that would change our percentages. If there's activity levels there, but right now they go all the way to I think they even included Sudbury right in this detachment. Mm-hmm. So the city of Sudbury is actually part of this, and they only account for the city of Sudbury, Noelville, and all that, still 48%, because the city of Sudbury is policed by their local police, so they only do the outskirts, right? So really, it changes detachment around Espanola, kind of there in center. So that was all factored in. So the activity of all of those combined is 48%, and the activity for us is 52. Should that change in the, as Ms. Craddock was indicating in the calls for service, if our activity levels go down and they go up, then we will benefit on our lease. If the reverse happens, then we may have to pay more part and get less money from it. Okay?
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
wrap my mind around this. It's all brand new.
We have no business, we have nothing to say about what is happening in French River and their facility. That really is between the OPP and the municipality of French River as to how they choose to deal with the province to ensure they have a presence. It wouldn't change our percentage at all. So if the province wants to increase costs on their part to serve French River, then they're free to do so, but they wouldn't be billed to us. That would be out of their share. So that's the best they can do. I don't know if I can word it another way.
No, I understand, but I just,
Yeah,
logically, I would assume that the bigger the territory and they all come and use this facility, then the ratio would change. But I understand being so close to Sturgeon Falls especially, they're close and we benefit from them being
Certainly.
close.
yeah, so really we didn't change, they didn't increase the territory. It was always, this Sudbury or Nipissing West Detachment was always going to be providing policing services for Marks Day Warren and Noelville. That was always part of it. So the Noelville Detachment is included in that calculation. It was all part of this. So it's activity based. It's not what is there or not there. It's the total activity in all the outlying areas is 48, and our local activity with local policing is 52.
I understand a little bit. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, back to you. That's
Okay,
good.
so we'll jump to earlier up in your book and we will go through mayor and council. And it starts on page 21.
I'm sorry, I had my little yellow hands in the corner. I didn't put my hand up. I was waiting. Sorry, the one last question I had was in regards on page 43 in the levies and contracts for our service partners. You mentioned for OSHA, okay, sorry. You mentioned for OSHA that the budget amount of 2,050,000 and change also includes a contribution to a dedicated reserve for the redevelopment. Is there a number for how much is going into that reserve?
We just got sort of revised OSHA tow numbers this afternoon. So the reserve transfer is 400,000
Okay,
and the rest is the levy. We also pay a small portion for busing that we share the costs with the Chateau. Yeah.
that was a separate line somewhere else, was it not? Or it's that?
Yes.
No, it's in the Chateau.
Oh, it was flagged
Yeah.
in the overview. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Okay, thank you very much. No more questions.
Okay, we'll try again. All right, so we're on page 21 with mayor and council. Salaries and wages and benefits is just for you lovely folks here. There is an increase. There's a CPI in November that's built into your honorarium each year. So that the November CPI impacts what your following year payment will be. Education, as I think it was in the summary as well, we moved back up to sort of a pre-COVID level. It was down during COVID because a lot of stuff was being done just virtually, or if things were being held at all. All the rest, we're sort of holding the line on. The community projects for the 7,200, that's the money that's been used for the senior supper in prior years. I know there has been a lot of discussion over the last couple of years on whether doing something at that time of year is the best event or not, but you do have those funds sitting there for the senior supper or an activity like that. Professional fees is just for IC and things like that come along your way. The miscellaneous $10,000 was just a bit of an increase for this year for initiatives that council might want to undertake in the event that we're looking at issues to address poverty, homelessness, things like that. So obviously, we're not going to solve all the world hunger problem with that, but just if there's small initiatives that council sees that council wants to address, there's that 10,000 sort of put into to deal with those, or to have that opportunity at least for you. When you look at what goes on in capital, council doesn't usually have capital. What you see in the 2022 is actually what you see in front of you here, plus a little bit of the IT. Well, if we do chairs, then we'll deal with it out of general government instead. And that's all that you guys have got on for mayor and council.
Any questions or comments? No.
Okay, so we'll move on to corporate services. And I think let me just feel first on what corporate services is, because there's a few of the things that fall under this that you might not see. So corporate services is obviously kind of admin support to the rest of the organization. So if our front was open and you could actually see when you came in the front doors, it's all the folks that you see sitting there. So we have people that are sort of dedicated to functions like tax, and then we've got people like our accounts payable and accounts receivable that support the entire organization. Also, what sits under here is our communications and our IT. All sit under corporate services. You'll see as we roll through, IT does a chargeback. So we charge some of our IT costs back out to other departments like fire, community services, public works, so that we kind of do this charge back on it. But that's just sort of internal allocation of the cost. We don't use it as a revenue generating from the fire department. We could. And also bylaws sits under corporate services. So that all fits under the corporate services umbrella. When we're looking at 2023, taxation revenue actually starts over what it was last year before we even get to doing levy increases. And that's just going in and you'll see it mostly reflects the supplementals that have come through from 2022. So new builds that have been picked up, new garages, things like that. MPAC is going to come talk to us sometime. I think we're supposed to be coordinating that and walk you through how assessment works and how assessment works in Ontario. But because of COVID, they did not do their reassessment that they would usually do in 2020. So we haven't had assessment gains. So when you see gains coming through, we're coming just on new builds and things like that, none of the assessment gains. We actually don't have a date set for the next go round of reassessments. We're all kind of expecting that they're going to skip the whole 20 to 24 assessment and then we'll go with a new assessment in 2024 is what we're all expecting to happen. But we don't actually know when they're going to get the new assessments in.
But just to be clear, I wouldn't want the public to think that we grab
No.
taxes from assessment gain. So let's say if my house is worth 100,000, it's reassessed at 20,000. We apply the same tax rate, and that's the windfall. That's not how it works. The tax rate is the variable from the assessment, and what we do is we wait until council knows what the what the expenditures and what the services they want to offer and all of that. And then the tax rate that is attached to that, becomes the variable. So that I want to assure you that the only assessment or the only tax increases that you would see there is from new construction, not from homes that you own that are on the lake that you pay a lot more. We don't go grab that. If we did, it'd be a lot easier for us. We don't.
Yeah. Payments in lieu are taxes that we collect from provincial entities or federal entities. So it is the same as property tax. They just call them a different name. That's all. OMPF is our big grant. And as you can see, it actually decreases slightly in this year. I think Mr. Barbo, again, when we did the introduction to council, spoke about how the OMPF has changed over the years. And, they bumped it back up temporarily, but it has really just been declining over the last several years. And the provincial government has kind of indicated to expect it to continue to decline. We have sort of done some increases into revenue for general government. Obviously, interest, we get interest both on bank balances, but we also have interest from our related parties. So the municipality holds loans to both power generation and environmental service, and we get interest on those. Right now, we're winning on interest rates. It's not necessarily a sustainable business model to do that forever, but right now we're winning on interest rates. A little bit of increase we put onto penalties and interest as well. We are, with we had some retirements, and with our tax collector now well in and settled, we're doing a really good job of getting on top of our receivables again, and getting collections through. The interdepartmental charges, that's part of what I said. Part of that is where we charge back the IT department, and part of that is also where we kind of charge like a rent to the library board. General reserve, I know, has been bounced around a lot. As you can see, last year there was a fairly significant transfer from general reserve as far as sort of a tax stabilization. Taking $1.5 million back out of the budget in one shot would probably cripple you. It'd certainly make a few people cry. So we've proposed just sort of to smooth that down. So from 1.5 down to 1.2 and just sort of smooth it down. Dividend income actually comes from power generation. So power generation passes along dividends. We have been splitting it in prior years between water and sewer and the municipality. And last year started kind of decreasing how much was in the water and sewer budget and moving more of it back to the municipal budget again. So on HR costs, like the, we've been getting this deal all along. So we had collective agreement settlements that have come through. There is actually a request for a new staff within our IT department that's included in this budget. So our IT department is really one full-time guy. He's a PN that takes care of all of our operations, and Dan's not with us, but he can talk about IT. IT doesn't just involve computers anymore. It's our copiers and our networks, and it's our security, and it's phones, and it's everything across all of our buildings, including all of our community buildings and our fire buildings and all of our other outside buildings. So this is really sitting in the hands of one individual. We do have a part-time employee that does come in and occasionally help with setup and things like that. He's not at a networking level. He does some of our displays and things like that, but he's not at a networking level. So we have a request to put in to bring in a sort of a junior IT engineer to just, both assist in our current workload, so that we can stay on top of our current workload, and also that gives us a bit of flexibility. Right now, our IT can't go on holidays, and if anything happened, we would be in a terrible amount of trouble because we don't have any backup plan. He supports, the phones at the fire for where the 911 calls come in, and all the rest. So it's a lot sitting in the hands of one individual. He takes care of all of our disaster recovery. So again, it's just to spread the workload we have now and also provide better protection to the municipality. Mr. Poloni spoke of it. Our auditors always talk about it. It's things like even just, cybersecurity and our backup and all the rest. Again, we're fortunate to have Mr. Yarosh with us, and he's got a very secure and good backup that we've been able to recover from some things that have been sort of disastrous to other municipalities when you've had sort of attacks come through and things like that. And we just need to ensure that as we go forward, that we maintain that level of security as we all sit here with our technology and all the rest. So that's why you see sort of some increase in the salaries and wages is sort of a request for this other position. As we roll down through operating, election costs obviously come out. You'll see down below when we get into all that reserve stuff that we are starting to put a request in that we'll transfer $25,000 a year into a reserve for elections, so that when we hit an election year, we're not taking all of this out of reserve in one shot. We've just got the stuff built up so that we can sort of deal with elections as they come. Everyone's been telling you about insurance increases. Our overall insurance was just shy of an 8% increase last year. You won't see it all in the municipal budget because it affects solid waste and water and sewer and a little bit of environmental services as well. It doesn't hit all departments equally, but that's what this is the insurance increase for general government. I'm just going to kind of hit the big things. Oh, if I'm going to jump down. Okay, so legal. Obviously, there have been challenges over the last few years. I don't expect things like 2022 to repeat as far as the level of expenditure. That said, you know, we do see some year-over-year increases. Professionals do cost us more, so there's a little bit of an increase in our legal line. I don't feel that it's necessary to try to budget for the last couple of years we've had. I don't see that as sort of normal legal practice is what we have. We use legal to deal with looking at bylaws, HR stuff that comes up, a few other things, occasionally some procurement stuff. And so it's much more mundane and routine. There's a drop in special projects. So special projects last year was budgeted to include the strategic plan that we've got a draft copy of that we'll bring back to council shortly, as well as our roads needs study. So this year, it's just the roads needs study carrying forward. This is also coming out of the same funding pool that Mr. Garbo spoke about with the fire master plan, is that we have this modernization and efficiency funds that we received from the province several years ago. And so that's just to finish up our roads needs studies, the 50,000 you see in this year's budget. Vehicle expense belongs to bylaw. Write-offs are tax write-offs. So we have tax write-offs for a variety of reasons. You'll see before you a couple times this year things like, or they're in your bylaws. You'll come across. We do a number of properties. We've got an agreements to reduce from multi-res rate down to residential rate for our geared to income housing. We do some smaller rebates for seniors and folks with disabilities at the time that our tax bills go out, a little bit of charitable rebates for some of the organizations in town. Because there hasn't been a reassessment by MPAC in so many years, sometimes in the year of reassessment, we will see more activity in this as individuals get their assessments from MPAC and then go, oh my goodness, no. And we will sometimes see that coming through, but because MPAC hasn't had that kind of reassessment in a number of years, I don't inspect or expect any significant change in this year. So then I'm going to flip the same to our capital section. And I have to say, general government capital is not anywhere near as exciting as anyone else's capital. Actually, I suppose I should hand it back to you, Madam Chair, in case anyone has any questions. Sorry.
Any questions or comments so far?
I do have one, please, Madam Chair. On the, oh, may I go?
Yes.
Thank you. On the line for insurance settlements, that was over double what the budget was. Is there a reason for the anomaly in the expense last year and why we wouldn't expect the same?
Yeah, if I can. So insurance settlements are usually, you know, it's when we have a lawsuit against us, and we have a lot, you know, not because of any fault, but just because people sue for all kinds of things. And so we've got our deductible, we're you know, up to our deductible. So, you know, it will vary from year to year depending on what kind of claims come through. The reason why this year, 2022 really was the anomaly, and that is again because things got tied up in settling because of the courts not operating, and then they all came through with a big swoosh over the last couple of years. So that's why this year's, why 2022 was the anomaly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Peller?
Yeah, thank you. Just for the general reserve. So last year, the 220 budget, you took out $1.5 million for the budget. Is that
Right, yes.
$1,557,000?
Yep.
Okay. So this year, that's what you're proposing in 2023 is $1.2 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Seeing none, back to you, Ms. Cat.
Okay, so the capital is on page 8 of your workbook, and as I said, it's not anywhere near as exciting, and the numbers are also a lot smaller. In some of the departments, their IT replacement actually sits in their operating. We've pulled it out to capital because our IT also will sometimes include our whole servers and things of much greater value. IT infrastructure is just replacement of regular computers. Surveillance and security is cameras and upgrades to those kind of systems, as well as some upgrades to access codes that go in there. Our server room is housed here, and again, just upgrades as far as connectivity in the server room and support for, air conditioning and wiring and racks and all of that. Offsite backup, again, is just an upgrade on our existing offsite backup. Council chambers equipment is actually that projector there. If you've used it in here, it tells you several times why it's not going to work anymore. Primarily, we do use the screens, but we have still the projector. The council archival equipment is going to facilitate some of the backups and how we maintain the video right now and how we go and retrieve that and just make that a little smoother and more time efficient and a little bit more secure as well. So again, not a lot of things there, nowhere near as exciting as replacing bridges or fire trucks. It is funded out of the reserve. So there is a reserve transfer for equipment, and we bring the amounts back in from reserve. The other reserve for the corporate services is actually just sort of capital financing that's paying back loan debt that you see on your schedule there. And I'll hand it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Craddock. Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
I do. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Just,
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe he was first.
okay. Just on clear, the big screens we see in this unit, that was part of last year's budget?
The monitors actually go back to 2021. Some of the finishing up of the cameras and stuff like that, and as well as this, the furniture, was 2022. Yep.
So it's not part of this budget?
No.
Okay. Was I had something else there? I'll come back.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you. Just on the corporate, or sorry, on the capital budget side, the surveillance and security budget for this year, is there any thought of rethinking that given current challenges? Like, are we going to need more than what you originally anticipated? Because I think there are some, like, is that enough?
If I may, so as far as the equipment part of things, I think that it's still, because the surveillance were cameras and a setup that was already planned before some of our recent troubles. Some of the other work that we're looking at doing is actually going to be facility maintenance. So as we replace doors and locks and do that kind of stuff, it's actually facility maintenance rather than, any of our IT capital that will happen then.
Okay, thank you very much.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. You are finished, Ms. Craddock?
I believe I'm done.
I will pass it back to Madam Mayor now.
That was very efficient. Thank you very much, Ms. Craddock, again, Chief Luffen, for the presentations tonight. We're only just over an hour into our meeting, so we've done very well so far. I might actually turn to Mr. Barbeau as to where we would like to proceed from here.
Well, sure. Thank you, Your Worship. We have, there was some requests for some information when I presented the overview. Some of the information was census data to drill down to from the comparators that we provided you about how our taxes fare related to comparative municipalities. And there's also a tax impact sheet as well as to how it would be affected by our property owners should you go to different levels. So I'll probably do the tax impact after, but I could share with you the census of 2021 profile comparator. And so Mr. Charm is just sharing that with people. I don't know if Mr. Sharm, if you have emailed it to them, as well. They haven't received. Yeah. Basically, I'll be verbalizing it anyway. But so the comparators, you saw the populations. Some of it's not quite right. There's not 66,000 people in Aurora, but anyway. No. It's more like 15,000 or something. Anyway, but the average household income is, so if you're looking at our ability to pay, one would look at you that we're obviously not the highest. The highest belongs to the municipality of Callander, which is a small community. A lot of it's waterfront. And they have an average income that's the highest of the comparators. Then you have Kenora, or you have Sudbury, so large municipality is next, and then Kenora. So you're looking at 118,000 for those in watching for a calendar. Ours is 84,000. Temiskaming Shores is 88,000. North Bay is 89,000. French River's 82, Elliott Lake is 65, Espanola is 90. So we're kind of all around the range from the comparators. Now, Councillor Pedane thought we were much older than we are. We're pleased to know, Mr. Pellerin, that you're, and so am I, way above the average. Our average age in our census is 47 years. Temiskaming Shores has us beat by a year. Sudbury is a little younger, 42.9. North Bay, 43.6. Kenora, 38.8. French River is a little older than us, 51. Espanola is about us, 46. Elliott Lake is the eldest in this group, 53. They kind of promoted themselves as a retirement community, so I see they're successful. And Callander is approximately us again. So our average age is 47, and so there's no real disparity here. And then if you look at the income, the 15 to 64, which are the the income earners. We're at 59% is between 15 and 64. Temiskaming Shores is 57. Sudbury 64%. 64 North Bay, 63 in Kenora, 57 in French River. Espanola is about 60%, about 50% for Elliott Lake, and 62%. So just a bit of a breakdown for the demographics when you're comparing the municipalities and the tax rates that we already presented to you. So where we are now is basically having a conversation, Madam Mayor, with respect to where council sees themselves going. And there's a few ways you can do that. You can just, I think that if you go through the stages of brief and you just pick a number, fine, or you kind of look at the budget workbook, and what we indicated was a variable that is an addition this year. And so if you want to reduce, if you want to reduce it from 6.65 There are some key changes that are additions. They're not necessarily, and I've always hated this, it's not a wish list. It's basically what your staff believe matches and what they need to be efficient and effective to offer the appropriate level of service with to the taxpayers. I.e., if I take I'll call him Poor Kevin. This is a big organization to run around with one person that way. And I have to also indicate too, that we do have redundancy built into the system. It's a little bit weak there. We do have outside contractors that we can use that can come in and fill in should the need arise. But we are at risk with redundancy as well. So is it absolutely necessary to have an additional person? One could say no. But then we just continue to have the pressure on Kevin. So that's the fallout of that, is Kevin is busy with absolutely everything that is plastic and has some wires in it, pretty much. Then you look at Mr. Poulet. I think those are HR increases, right, Elisa? There's Kevin and then Mr. Poulet with 2 positions.
Correct.
The one position, again, is our ability or inability, and certainly no slight on Mr. Johnny Belanger, who's been great. He's kind of the hero of on time, on budget with the police building. But, project managing for large projects takes a lot of time. And project management for even small projects takes a fair amount of time and resources as well. And so as Kevin is running around everywhere, there's plastic and wires. Mr. Belanger is running around assisting the fire chief North Manettville. There'll be some work there, I'm told. These are just operational things, but those kind of projects of fixing roofs and all of that, Johnny is the person that takes care of that. And so the addition to an additional person, we feel, is just matching what the resources we have now, are at this time. Should council really look at reducing and really doing an analysis of our facilities in a very hard way? I don't think that can happen over the course of a year or two in terms of rationalizing facilities, but there may not be a need for 2 down the line if we invest in a bunch of good buildings and we don't do any other construction or repair. But right now, it is problematic for us to stay on top of our construction. I would argue as well, now that Mr. Poulet's not here, is that's you can give Mr. Poulet as much money as you want, but if he's going to give it back to you at the end of the year because he simply doesn't have the time to fulfill those projects, then that's some of the fallout, is we just don't have the resources to do that. Again, there's also a position which is replacing a position, I suppose, because we had kind of a catch-all person, but we have our former lead lifeguard is now managing the recreation center. We have problems even providing programming in the swimming pool. And I don't know if anybody were looking at the news in the last 6 months, but it's tough all over North America to find lifeguards. They've been shutting pools down. They've been shutting beaches down, and Florida can't find them, and they pay them a ton of money to be those Baywatch type people. And they make a lot of money, but even there's just a real lack of lifeguards. But we have, it's a real chore here to make sure we have student lifeguards, and so what we need is a daytime lifeguard to take that away from Sarah. Any other major changes in our operations, would be on that list that we'd have a look at in terms of material changes. So if I take you through the material changes, you have $10,000 for poverty initiatives. You can't really do anything with levies, as indicated. Public Works, really, unless you want to reduce the level of service, I don't think there was anything there. That was a status quo budget. You have 10,000 for poverty initiatives. I think that Her Worship and I were speaking even during the strat planning or the term planning session about that. That came up, and we both kind of wrote down having something because again, it's my first or second year of all of the years I've been here where it's become so prevalent and front and center, including security for this building. So it certainly is something that municipalities need to start looking at with our partners, of course, and tackling. So that's why we kept that there. So it's a small amount, but it'd be like 0.2 of 1%. Again, I talked to you about the project manager. Mr. Poulin also wants to increase his contribution to reserve. It's been undertaking facility reviews and asset management plans. And again, he's in the same boat as Chief Lufin with respect to the fact that we just don't have enough to sustain our crumbling assets. So he's asking for an increase there. Fire is asking for a $50,000 increase. That is, and those are really the only things that are different. Again, the key issues is that things have costs have escalated. The OMPF has not kept pace with any escalation in costs, which forces the burden on our tax portion. Council did approve an increase in fees, which I'll offer right now. I believe we're comfortable of retrieving an additional $30,000 based on that, given when the implementation cycle is, because you don't have a full year. So that would reduce your 6.65 to probably around 6.45, 6.4. I don't have my calculator in front of me, but Lisa, would you?
$6.49.
6.49 instead of 6.65. So again, Madam Mayor, unless Ms. Nicol is going to lead this, perhaps just a general discussion with respect to of those items in the key budget changes, if there are any serious comments with respect to something you don't agree with, and a council concurrence, there's council concurrence on expenditures that you don't agree with, then we will then quantify that and tell you what your new target is. So maybe, if I may, just a general discussion and open it up to the floor.
Okay, I just would like to start with just a couple of key facts again. So without the fee increases accounted for, right now we're at 6.65.
6.49 now.
Well, without, because we don't have those quantified in the papers in front of us. So let's stick with what we have, which is a 6.65 plus 1.241. Is that correct, out of the reserve, or is it 1.2 even?
1.2 even.
Okay, I just have another couple of questions that would probably need to go through our esteemed treasurer, just to kind of give context for everybody, so we're all kind of starting with our heads in the same place. So the increase in total expenditures for this year is what percentage, please? So that's the 2027 was last year, 27.4 to 28. I'd just like to get a round percentage of what the increase in expenditures is on the overall budget.
your, would be the page in your summaries.
I'm sorry, it's on page 14, and I'm looking at total expenditures, including boards at 20, last
Oh,
year, 2022 with 27.4.
0.241 into 31,586,323, Lisa.
Where do you get 31? Oh, up there. That's
So-
revenue.
No, you just want the expense.
So you would take your total expenditures, which is 31,586,323. That was what was budgeted last year.
No,
And then-
no, it's not. It's, I'm looking at the 27,442 at the bottom of page 14. Am I looking at something wrong?
Oh, I was looking at page 19.
You should be looking at page 19, your worship.
Well, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
19.
So I'll say it again. I'm pretty sure about what I'm saying.
Okay,
The last year's total expenditure budget was 31,586,323. The shortfall this year is 1,241,232. So you would take the 1,241,232 into the 31,586,323, and that would give you what the expenditure increase would be.
Actually.
No?
So if you look at the change just in expenditure, not the difference in the change of revenue. So the change in expenditure is
Oh,
1.3
1.50.
million. Yeah.
Okay,
So the expenditures are
okay.
4.27% increase over last year. So the 6.65 is not all expenses increasing.
No, it's all included,
Yeah.
revenue and
sorry,
expenses.
can you give me that number one more time, please?
4.27.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, I'd actually be interested in just hearing from each council member about how they feel about where we are now and what we need to do to get where we want to be. Sorry, I'm plugging in. Does anybody want to go first? I can't see hands, so somebody's gonna have to help me here. Okay, Mr. Pellerin.
It's Fern, Madam Mayor. For me, I'm not comfortable to give you an answer right now because we got some more stuff today at the last minute. And it's too much to digest there. I'm never sure from one meeting to the other what to expect, and I'm not blaming anything, anybody, I'm new to this process, so I'm gonna need some time to digest that a little bit.
Okay, any other members?
Madam Mayor? So
Thank
through
you.
you, for myself, I think one of the big thing for us is that every individual here, with the exception of Mr. Restool, has never gone through a budget before. I've done my research. I don't even know if my research is accurate. My research is through, obviously, the internet and what we can see and what we can find. And by looking at other municipalities in our region, same height, same population-ish, I find that a 6.65 is very high. However, when you're asking us as a council on what we think where we should cut or whatnot, I 100% understand Mr. Barbeau or Alyssa or staff. However, I think that's where we're going to need some help from them and their expertise to say, okay, what is it that you think is good for us as a council? And here's where we can cut, or here's where we can, where we can adjust things to get, let's say, if as a council, we would think that a number would be 3.5 for this year. How do we get there, right? Their expertise, I believe, is what we will need to rely on, being all new into this process. Personally, I feel we definitely need to be lower I had that conversation with many individuals in the past 2 weeks. We had the conversation with me and Mr. Restoul made the comment several weeks ago about our hands being tied by the last council with the fact that they went with a 1% increase last year, which 100% tied our hands. However, my personal belief is we need to, and I believe that's why we were all elected as council members, is we need to stop living in that past. And we need to stop saying that that council made it hard for us. Absolutely, they did. However, I also sat and thought and listened to Mr. Remillard make the arguments, which are 100% valid arguments about the cost of fuel going up, the cost of sand going up, the cost of salt going up. Chief Lufin saying the cost of repair going up. However, what we also need to forget is, or not forget, pardon my language, what we also need to not forget is that same cost is also going up for all the residents of West Nipissing. So yes, the cost is going up for us as a municipality, but that cost is also going up for all the residents. All the residents are coming out of this thing called COVID, where so many people are struggling with income. And I feel that coming across with a 6.65 is high. Do I think that we need to go to 1 or 2? Absolutely not. I wouldn't do that I wouldn't cripple our municipality. I'm hoping that we can come to, and I really don't want to throw a number. I don't want to see a 3.5. I don't want to see a 4. I don't want to say, I see the sheet that Mr. Barbeau provided us, which I'm seeing it going down, if I think that's what that means, which is awesome. And compared to other municipalities around, if we can get down, one thing that Mr. Barbeau made a mention several meetings ago, which is true, is we're having more and more people wanting to come to West Nipissing because we're having a lot of people from down south moving to West Nipissing. Why? Because it's nothing to drive 25 minutes to North Bay for work. If you live down in Toronto, like a lot of people in our municipality have, they know that a 25-minute ride is nothing. So the population will grow here in West Nipissing. However, if people look and they see that West Nipissing is increasing at 6.65, then why not go to Callander, who might be lower, or Astorville? Actually, that might be Callander, correct? Who might be lower. It's just, so that's just my, like, Madam Mayor, you asked for us to share. That's my personal thought. I mean, I might be wrong on some things. I'm often them. However, that's my thought process. I just want to try to,
Can I respond?
Absolutely.
You're not wrong it's frustrating for me in the know, listening to municipalities spit out percentages, because percentages are a percentage of a dollar amount that's not ours. So we go through and we present to you, if you want to present Callander as an example, and they have a 4.5% tax increase to our 6.65. But if you go back to your document, they're 4.5% in real dollar terms compared to what it would be here. That's the unfortunate part, is because we still have to offer the same services other municipalities have, and we're already taxed lower. And so we have to get a higher amount just to grab that compared to them. So it's unfortunate, but that's the reality politicians live in. And so I respect the position you're in. And so I do understand that 6.65 is a mouthful. If you're asked, but you get my point why I showed you that, right? So then if you're asking me, which is, and I appreciate the respect that you show. If you're asking me how to get it down, I could get it down to you, and look at certain things, and then I can give you a caveat. So, I mean, you can take away, and I think Madam Mayor discussed, and I'm not trying to close a sale here. Yeah, I am. But she, indicating in your first year, you're only 3 years here, whatever, unless there's an absolutely need to make a change in expenditures, I would prefer a status quo budget. if you go to a status quo budget, then, you know, we could continue to limp along with one Kevin, and that'll continue on. So it'll just be, expect the inefficiencies or whatever to happen. We could continue on with one Johnny, and there's options around that. One Johnny sounds like, anyway, sorry, Johnny. And then the daytime lifeguard, that's a threat. That one's more of a threat. Then you're looking at certain increases in reserves, and you can postpone those, right? So you could not give the fire department, he doesn't take it personally, the additional 50,000. But I'll tell you that the problem of vehicle replacement won't go away, and you're that much less next year or whatever when you have to, right? If you don't provide to Steph the 131, you might want to consider that under the condition that, and I'm planning on it, to bring you a lot of assets. And that's where you have to watch, because, and remember this conversation when we bring assets and you're starting to get pressure about releasing them or not releasing them. Because if we want to reduce and consolidate our assets and provide our resources where people actually want them, then you could have some savings. With respect to the fire master plan as an example, I guess what I would say is this council, past and the past council, should have been, and I've indicated that I've been able to bring rates down to a certain amount, and I've been more risky than, say, my colleague, Ms. Craddock. But I'm telling you now that I don't like the risk, the Russian roulette. So if you want me to, I'd rather go around, but if I'm then directed, Councillor St. Louis, and I'd be happy to do so, to provide you with a solution based on what would hurt the least to what my views are of what you need to operate and to satisfy your constituency, I'd be happy to do that down the line. Yeah. But, yes, we have been dipping into reserves. The argument not to defend past councils and it's only one argument, it's not the most valid argument, is that if you've taken too much money from your residents and then you're going to tax them and whatever, so a lot of that was give back the money that you took too much in the first place, right? So it's noble, but it causes this when you've taken too much. So I will agree that last year's budget was at least 3% less than I would have been comfortable with, which would be $540,000. You would have had $540,000 more if you would have had around a 4% tax increase last year. And if you had had a $540,000 tax increase last year, that would have been around, your deficit would be around 7, or you'd be less than 4 or 3% now, but you would be around the 4%. Council, it had that one decision happen. So be careful, even though we're not talking 1 to 4, be careful if you go down to 3, I could tell you, I would pay a lot of money on a bet, you're going to be having this discussion next year again. So then what is that acceptable number? Unless you raise your own source revenues, you are going to be into some serious trouble. OMPF problems not going away. The COVID, gravy train to absolutely everybody, individuals and organizations, is over, and now the government of Ontario and Canada need to pay. They need to they can't just borrow money to pay, to do that too. So if we're dependent on those two levels of government, it's going to be difficult. So just to respond to you on the 6.65 compared to a 4.5 from North Bay, let's say, you take the real dollars of what that means on the average household, and you'll find out that it's quite similar. That's all I'm suggesting. Not suggesting, though, that 6.65 isn't ugly, because it is.
If I may, Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
No, and I 100% understand, even to the point where I also understand the fact that the 1% last year brought us lower than where we should be in what you're saying, right? I don't dispute that by no means. However, I think we owe it as, well, sorry, let me rephrase. I can't speak for the other council member. I owe it to the residents, to the ones that have spoken to me,
Right.
to try to figure out a way that if it is, let's say 4.5 this year and a 4.7 next year, and little by little, as opposed to a lot, to make up the errors from the past, then
Yeah.
baby steps is basically what I'm
No,
getting.
I can look, I could certainly look at that. I certainly look at that. In fact, you know, I've heard, and the mayor, can I call you a broken record? Because she has continuously belabored the fact that she hates 1.2 dipping into reserve. It's just absolutely crazy. If she had her way, it would be zero, absolutely. And that would be an extra 9% tax increase. So, or 8%. So what I've indicated to her, and I think I may have indicated to council, is that Ms. Craddock and I's objective is to chip away at that in the course of your term. I think, you know, as a sales pitch, so if I were a resident, but you know, and I am, but probably I would, maybe not the typical, I would appreciate that this council is getting their fiscal house in order for the future, because it isn't just a 1 year, it isn't just a 4 year, it's a, where are we going to be in 10 years? What do you want to see? And, you know, what are our sources of revenue? So if you want us to come back with a kind of a multi-year plan as to how to rate the ship, we can play with that and bring it back at a council meeting. And then you don't even need to tell me a percentage. If you want me to go, this is as much as I can cut without really affecting service levels, I can look at that and then bring it back. Again, I would be telling you that we are affecting service levels, but we can limp along. I wouldn't have proposed this budget to you if, you know, it isn't like, yay. You know, we work for council and we don't like where we're at either. And, you know, it's just, it is what it is. So, Ms. Craddock, what do you think? We sit down and go over and have a chat next week with Mr. Poulin when we're back, okay? Try and see what we can do and then go from there.
Well, excuse me, I'd still like to hear from some more council members. So only Councillor St. Louis has had an opportunity to speak yet. And I do think it's important that we get a sense from all the members that are available, kind of where their heads are at. And, you know, I kind of want to get an overall sense, but I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Mr. Barbeau. You know, the fact is we have some real challenges as a municipality that it's going to face us for the next 4 years. We have, you know, we have challenges in demographics. I always say, and you had given some numbers at the beginning, but I think one of the really important numbers that people fail to realize how much of an impact it has on our municipality is our population density. So when you look at what our population is against what our geographic land area is, how many roads we have to manage, how many fire stations we need to have, how many community centers we need to have, that has a real great impact on what it costs us to serve our residents, because we are serving residents over one of the largest geographic areas, you know, in the province, where we have pockets of population in all corners, and I think that has a real impact. But I think that there, for many years, there has been kind of a lack of looking at the municipality strategically, like from a council perspective, not serving the strategic role of council in building where we need to be, where we need to go, how we grow, how we become more sustainable in the long term. And I hope that those are the types of things that once we get through this budget process and we roll into, you know, the rest of our first year and our second year and our third year, that those are the issues that we focus on, is building this municipality for the future. But I would like to just have an opportunity to hear from a couple other councillors. Councillor Tessier?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For myself, I'm really visual, and I would like to possibly see how much it would impact, maybe a dollar value. I don't know, like for the year, like
Which
the
you mean?
percentage, like whatever, like let's say 6.49%. What does that mean in tax money for me? Let's say for the year as an average.
I think there's a second document that you were provided that provides kind of a general impact with respect to, it's about 50-50 of those. There's about 3,700 properties with 6.65%,
Sorry,
which is already at 6.49. But let's say 6.65, 3,700.
with the amount?
Yeah. 3,700 properties would pay $0 to $100 a year, and from 100 to 200, there'd be an additional 3,500 properties that would have a $100 increase on their taxes next year at this level. And that's, you see the percentages of the total.
Yeah, percentage don't really do anything for me. So at 6.6 and what's $1,241, no, that's 1 million, sorry. What would be like a dollar figure?
A dollar figure on 6.65, 1.2 million, 1,241,000 on your
No.
budget.
Mr.
Individual.
Barbeau, Mr. Barbeau,
Individual. Go ahead.
Mr. Barbeau, I think what she is asking is what the tax impact would be if, say, you had a house valued at $300,000. What would that mean for an increase if your house was valued at $600,000? So she's trying to determine the impact on individual property owners at that 6.23% as an average, which I understand, because I think that that does put it into perspective. If your house is worth $300,000, then your taxes are going to go up by approximately $125 a year. And that, I'm just throwing that out as an example. So that's the information I believe that Councillor Tessier is looking for.
We can
Yes,
pull that
thank
together.
you.
Yeah, actually, if you look at the page, same one. So as Mr. Barbeau said, 44% of residential properties will have $0 to $100 increase. The average change on those properties is $53 annually. That's what that last column is, the average change. That's the average for that group. So 44% of the population, or 44% of the properties will only see an average change of $53 per year. And then the 100 to 200, that group will see an average change of $141. Now, if we're here for a bit longer having a conversation, I can probably break that back down to what it is per $100,000. So then you just got a multiplier that you can use on things.
We can bring that at a future meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just to get a better aspect, because we do have individuals who possibly own their home, but they're just living on a pension, a single senior. And I know the $80,000 range is the median, but we do have population, half the population that are making 50,000 or less, and they're the ones that are going to be impacted with everything increasing, still gas, food, and all that. You may see some of those people, and we're talking like maybe lose their house. I'm not sure, but it's just things are not getting
On a
better.
on a $54 change per year, I don't think people are losing their house. I hate to be inconsiderate, but we too are affected by the increases of that. And unless council wishes to change levels of service, There's a lot of great ideas with respect to community services and everything you want to offer. That is where your variable is. If you want to, indicate that we're checking out and we're not growing, and we want to downsize, that's fine. But in my opinion, a $54 increase for critical services that you're receiving, such as roads, helping the needy under social services, Eau Chateau, community service, policing, fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that as
Yeah.
well. Also, when you talk about bringing in revenue, is there something beyond, depending on governments, that we can do? Like in the past, we have so much resources that we can host events or do, we have volunteers, people who are retired that could volunteer to create events that we had before to bring in money rather than just depending on governments as well. That could be a suggestion or something to look at too.
I'm not
Well,
aware
we
of any
can't
municipalities
budget for that.
model drives. Pardon me?
So that's not something we can budget for this year. And that's, there are other, we're very limited, and I understand that. Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, Madam Tessier. Is anybody else, Councillor Rivard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor St. Louis and Mr. Barbeau covered most of what I was going to say, but just back to your initial question of our opinion on where we'd like to go and kind of what we're seeing. I do also think that 6.49 now is a little high. And but I also understand what Mr. Barbeau was mentioning based on those other numbers that we would still actually be lower than your typical Northern Ontario municipality of our size. But we also don't want to lose the advantage of being that lower tax municipality that still has that small town community feel that can offer a wide variety of services and programs. So it's difficult, right? If council decides, and I hope that's what we're going to be discussing soon, to decline some of these certain increases or accept them, then we'll have to realize that people want these things, these services, these programs, and these program services, they cost money. So at one point, we'll have to agree or disagree. But I think it'd be smart to discuss those items, like the lifeguard, for example. When I hear people asking about the programs at the pool, well, it's true what they're saying, that it's hard to retain a lifeguard during the school months because it's typically students, but that's when the pool's in highest demand. And now I'm hearing that there's no mom and tot programs. It's very difficult to keep lifeguards around, so it might be needed to have that job added to our funds or to our budget. But then something else I like to concentrate on is that the CPI consumer price index over the past 2 years has been over 10%. So if we're increasing taxes cumulatively over the next 2 years to around 7%, right, with that 1% very low increase last year, that during COVID when everything was expensive, I'm not too sure how that's possible, but that 7% would still be lower than that CPI percentage increase over the past 2 years as well. So one thing though that I don't like definitely is that $1.2 million coming out of reserves, because when you add it to the 1.5 of last year, that's over 50%, if I'm not mistaken, of our reserves over 2 years. And that seems a little high when you're talking about sustainability. But as what Councillor St. Louis mentioned, that the whole idea that everything's more expensive, that's true. And we can't deny that, and we can't really get away from there. But if we want to offer services and programs and keep building our community, sometimes taxes will most likely have to go up. We'll just have to find that happy medium as a team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Am I still on? Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Rivard. Other takers on the floor? I can't see anybody in the room, so if you would like to speak.
Everybody has their hand up. Stick it
Everybody?
up.
Okay, Councillor Nicol.
Okay, well, over the last few weeks, I'm pretty confident we've all had residents reach out and voice concerns over the potential increases. And I would like to advocate on behalf of them for a lower number, but I do understand at the same point that we need to spend money to attract and retain residents, as well as maintain the existing infrastructure that we already have. And we were presented some really good projects, requests, and overall necessities that will run our municipality efficiently. And to turn any of them down seems wrong. So I don't know how to find that happy medium. Are there any assets we could possibly do away with? And these numbers on this paper you gave us, to go down the percentages, what would we potentially be cutting to get down? Is that a valid question? Do you have that answer?
I would have to go and have a look. I think what you have in your workbook is the key changes to operations, right? And so some of them are not fixable with respect to utilities and insurance costs that are increasing. And that's not just because cost of municipalities are hit harder than homeowners with respect to insurance increases, because they are measured against other municipalities and disasters and everything like that. So the highlighted in yellow were the differences asked between last year's budget and this year's budget. So certainly if you wanted me to drill down and find a lower number, I would be coming back to you with a proposal and the impact of so that you're aware of the decision, the impact of the recommendation that I would make. With respect to selling assets, I don't think you want to, pay for your credit card, with your mortgage, or in the sense that what it will do, Councillor Nicol, is allow us to refocus and target our expenditures in areas that are needed. And so I'm just going to throw a number, and it's just it's a guess kind of number, but your average facility, smaller facilities, obviously costs a lot more, so is our rec center, but you're looking at, just to keep the doors open, around 30 to 40 grand. So that's 30 to 40 grand saved per building that you don't need. And then there's a revenue that you would get by disposing of it. What I would recommend is any disposal of assets, including the trailer park, should that happen, would stay into the facility reserve, and it would just help you be able to modernize these things and reduce expenditures accordingly. So eventually you'll see the benefit by doing that.
That's all I have.
We lost our chair.
The dog.
Yeah.
She just got it.
I'm sorry, I had to manage dogs again. Somebody else next? Councillor Cushing?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I echo with Councillor St. Louis and Councillor Rivard, and also what Councillor Pellerin had mentioned. I think it's a lot to kind of digest as our first budget. So I think me personally, I need to just take everything in and just really let that sink in. I understand on the other aspects too. There's hard costs that the municipality can't go without, like insurance increases, fuel increases. Gas is almost $1.50 again now. There's no signs of that going down anytime soon. So thinking we're really juggling, we're not between a rock and a hard place, but we're close to it. And I think if we go to any of the extremes, it won't be favorable to our residents long term. So like, let's say if we go with a 1% increase, that won't be sustainable long term, and we'll be paying, for it over the next 4, 5, 10 years. Having a 6.65% increase is a little steep. Advocating on behalf of residents that are low income, and that considering the vast territory of our municipality, I think going at 6.65 might be a little harsh for this year. But if we can get, I wouldn't go with 1, but I wouldn't go with 6. I'd go kind of in between if we can find some savings, if we can. I know that'll be quite hard, but for me, like I mentioned, it's a lot to take in, so I'd like to have a little bit more time to let that sink in. Seeing what we can do to kind of find some efficiencies right now. And I know it's not something we can say, on dit en français, on peut pas faire ça en claquant ciseaux. But I think us as a council, we need to sit down maybe over another weekend and kind of figure out what we want to do, you know, find fiscal health wise to help the municipality long term, because, you know, systematically dipping into reserves, I don't find that good. It's like putting away, you know, funds for, you know, your property taxes and your heating, you know, and your hydro, and just dipping that, you know, at the end of the month to kind of, you know, balance your own personal budget. I just find that it's, you know, quite dangerous over time. So that's just my my take on it.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Cushing. I appreciate that. Is there anybody else? I guess, have we gotten everybody?
Councillor Paladin.
Yep, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, for sure, I wouldn't be in favor of the status quo. Because me, I'm calculating everything. So if you take what we take from the reserve and the percentage, it would mean that we'd be bringing the taxes up 13.32%, which I don't know how you fix that. They took some in the reserve from last year. If we do again this year, what about next year? So I don't know. If we bring it down to under 4% for an increase in taxes, do we do enough to not go in the reserve again next year? Because we can't do that every year.
No, it doesn't at all.
No. So, but we blame, you know, we blame last council, but we're doing, I know because they didn't bring up the tax high enough, but we're picking in the reserve again.
So to repeat, the reserve last year, I think it was a surplus of about 1.5, and I think we went into it about 1.4 and change was the what we dipped into it. And this year we're lowering that to 1.2. We did have a surplus of about 770,000, so the net dip into reserve is about $500,000 this year. There is no way that I could recommend not dipping into reserve until we stabilize that. What we need to do is chip at it and have a plan over time. Let's say you owe $60,000 of unsecured debt and you make 100,000. You're not going to be able to pay that in 1 year. So you're going to have a plan and an austerity plan to basically reduce it. So given the changes that we've had with no COVID funding and that, our recommendation this year was to take it to 1.2. So next year, my vision would be to get it down to 800. So you'll be dipping in 400,000 or possibly 2.5% just to pay back your debt, and then 400 and then whatever. So you'll be kind of healthy, but you're not going to get it in 1 year. There's no, I can't recommend that. I can't see it. We can't print money. There's no way of doing that. With respect to levels of service, in this budget year, I'm not 100% sure what we can get it to. And that was the whole point of last year dipping into 1.4 is if you know, let's say it should have been 4. And in fairness to the last council, they were not really communicating well. And so I knew there wasn't going to be a whole lot of love for 4.5 in an election year where there's not a whole lot of love in general. And so I offered about 2.5 to just get out of this process and get to this council. They weren't happy with that and they brought it down to 1. Where you go and get that is by dipping into reserves more. And so it's directly proportionate to the fact that you're not, your own source revenue are not at a level where you want to have them. So If you want, yeah, so I guess what I am hearing as a generality is that 6.65 is not acceptable, and that's fine. I don't own 6.65. I think I indicated to you in 2001, I started at a 47% tax increase. Yeah, seriously, ended up being about 3. But that was a new municipality, so our starting point is 6.65, but and starting points before were 12, 13, they'd be dropped down to 3 or 2. But I am telling you, if I can get it shy of 5, I'm not necessarily going to like the financial decisions we're taking, but I can get it there. And I do, as an administrator, support Councillor St. Louis' comment about the same thing with the reduction of your reserves over time. Righting the ship over time is better than in 1 year too, right? So if we can see, if Elisa and I can work on a multi-year plan as to when we can get to sustainability. I'll point out to you in 2008 or 2009, I remember where I was in Laving at the CCL. We had one of those out of town meetings. And Peter Ming indicated, because he had to, he was legislated to provide a financing plan over time, and council approved a 10% increase in sewer and water rates for, I think, a couple of years in a row, and then it dropped down. It was extremely unpleasant, obviously, but now you're not going to ever see those issues anymore because it's been stabilized. The tax budget hasn't happened that way. So we can continue to look at 1 year at a time and try and get out of Dodge. But I guarantee you that you'll remember this conversation saying that you're going to have the same problems next year. And if you want to just tweak that away where you can get a budget increase, that's reasonable. I'll point out to you too, 15 years ago, we had 0% tax increases for about 5 years too. So it's not just the last term. It's been multiple terms where, yeah, we can pull it off because we had some windfalls in what used to be called the CRF, which was pre-OMPF. And so that allowed them to, look like a hero. But unless councils are starting to look at the organization, the service delivery that we need to make in a longer term horizon, we're going to be facing this every year. Elisa, I don't know if you have any. You're probably seeing that we can't get under 5, right? So I'll come back with a proposal if you want.
Just one quick question, Madam Mayor, if I may. When we first started off, Mr. Barbeau asked if we have any thoughts or on where or how. So am I correct in assuming a while ago when we first started off, you talked about 30,000, removing 30,000 from somewhere? It would take us from 6.65 to 6.49, I believe is what Ms. Craddock. And the only reason I'm asking is we're all going to go home with all this paperwork. We're all going to look, we're all going to try to digest. So I'm just wondering if $30,000 averages about a 1.5 or a 0.15, I should say, off the
$186,000, Councillor St. Louis, is 1%.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah,
Okay,
186 is
Okay.
1%.
Okay, thank you.
So to find 3% as an example, you're looking at about $600,000 cuts, right?
Yeah, okay,
So,
perfect, thank you.
So that's it. So the 30, to explain, is council was approached by the planning and building people about woefully low user fees, and you agreed to increase those fees. And so we are indicating that we would increase the revenues in planning and building by an additional $30,000 because they've already been increased in revenue too. So I'm leery to, as Chief Lufin indicated, especially with revenues, to overestimate revenues. You're just going to pay the price next, by being off next year. So not that you want to have certain big surpluses like 1.5, but you don't want to have deficits either, because that's really problematic, right? So, yeah, that's where we would get it. So your starting number now, or in your analyses, is 6.49. And then, like I say, I can bring back some discussions, and then have council, if you have the documentation there. Maybe the next meeting, Madam Mayor, if you'll indulge me, I'm not available the 23rd. I am available the 22nd, so I cannot. So if people are available next week on the 22nd, then we can have our next budget meeting then. It's a Wednesday.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm looking at my calendar.
I think that's what we agreed
Yeah, that's
on
what we
it.
have.
Did you read that already? Good.
Yeah, I think so.
Good. Okay. I don't know. I was a little bit lost. I hope to have this meeting tomorrow, and it's today. And so I just checked out last meeting. I wasn't getting my way.
Okay, so we have council next Tuesday, the 21st at 6:30, and then we're proposing to do our next budget meeting next Wednesday, the 22nd at 6 p.m. Is that correct? Everybody's okay with that? Okay. I would just like to close in saying I really appreciate all of you in giving your feedback and your thoughts. I think it's just really good for all of us to hear where we are. When we start the next meeting, I will expect that Councillor Gagne and Councillor Restool, who couldn't be with us here tonight, will take the time to watch this exciting video. And so what I'll do with the next meeting, if you'll permit me, is I'll actually open with allowing both Councillor Restool and Councillor Gagne to kind of give their same kind of feedback. So at that point, we would have heard from all of our members. Mr. Barbeau and Elisa will go and pull out half their hair and grow grays in the other half, and try to figure out some ways for us just to get a little leaner on what we're doing. But I do appreciate the input of all of you through the process. It's a learning experience for all of us, and I just really appreciate you being forthright in your comments and respectful, and just having good discussion, because that's what we're here for, and we're all here for the same reason, which is to find a place where we all feel happy with how we're serving our residents, and so thank you very much. With that, anybody else have anything more to add before I proceed with closing the meeting? I can't see hands, so somebody's got to speak up if there's somebody there. Okay.
No, it's all good here.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, I'll leave you at 4.1 there, please.
It is moved by Councillor Pellerin and seconded by Councillor Tessier. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-21, being a bylaw of the West Nipissing Municipality to confirm the proceedings of council at its budget meeting held on the 15th day of March 2023, shall come into force and take effect on the day it is passed.
Questions or comments? None? I'm assuming. All in favor?
It's carried.
Thank you.
It is moved by Councillor Tessier and seconded by Councillor Pellerin. Be it resolved that the council budget meeting held on March 15th be adjourned.
Questions, comments? All in favor?
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, staff. Thank you to Seb for running the camera. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Hope you guys are feeling better in there out on TV land.